Hey, worship leader, welcome back to the channel. Today, I have a first-time guest, David Willis. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. So, yeah, I found you on Instagram
Yeah,
not long ago. The algorithm, the wonderful
that
algorithm,
algorithm.
yeah, sent you to me, and you are killing it with the reels, right?
Oh man.
Just killing it. And I was like, who is this guy? And I was swiping, and I was like, wow, this is good. And then I forgot which video in particular. I was like, this is really good. And so I was like, I should reach out to him and have him on my channel to share some of his Willis wisdom.
Yeah, Willis wisdom. I'm getting that handle right now. Let
That's
me
right.
make a
Yes,
note of
get it.
that.
So tell the people here on the channel who don't know you, because that's everyone, maybe.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Who are you? Where are you from? Where do you serve? How can they find you on social media to watch your reels?
Yes. Well, you can find me at David Willis Co. pretty much everywhere. That's Facebook, YouTube, Instagram. I'm on TikTok as well. Not doing any dances or anything like that, but
Oh
I'm
man.
there. And you can find me at www.davidwillis.co. So I'm from Beaumont, Texas, which is about 90 miles east of Houston. I serve at a church called One City Church here in Beaumont. I've been here pretty much my whole life. We've changed the name in the time that I've been here, so it was Cathedral in the Pines for anybody in the area that might know that name or anything like that. So been serving there since honestly I was about in high school. Spent a couple of years serving at different churches, but then been back here for about almost 9 years now. Been on staff there for 6 years. My wife and I met there, got married in the chapel there. We've dedicated our children there. So, I mean, we have a long history of raising our family, starting our ministry, serving in the house of the Lord at that specific house for a long time. And so we have rich history there and just love our church.
Wow. And you said you have kids. How many kids you got?
I do. I have three biological children, and then one little girl who's come to us through the foster care system. Who we actually kind of share custody with her aunt, and so we kind of co-parent there. And it's a really cool situation that just God showed up in a mighty way. And so at times throughout the week, we got four kids. Two, let's see, both our oldest two are 8 and 6. And then the younger two are 20 months and then about 3 months. So we have
Wow.
kind of a full house. We stay pretty busy. So
Wow. That's awesome. I got three kids too, and a dog. So that's not the same. But
sure, we have two big dogs too. I got a husky and a labradoodle, and they are absolutely like children because they so have needs and whine and all that kind of stuff. So
man, and that's awesome. So we chatted a couple weeks ago, and we were just talking. We didn't have we were just catching up, getting to know you.
yeah,
And in that conversation, you went on this wonderful rant about songwriting. I say rant, I don't remember. I just remember thinking, well, this needs to be a video. And so
sure.
I don't even remember really what we talked about, but that's fine because we'll talk about it today if we get into it. So I thought the title of this video might be, people have already clicked on it by now. They know whether I settled on it or not. But should we waste our time writing songs specifically for the church? And so I wanted to talk to you about that because I felt like as you were speaking, you kind of you had a passion about it. You had a lot to say. And I was like, I was feeling motivated. And I was like, I want that for the people who might be watching this video. So first of all, can you give us some thoughts? Give us some reasons maybe for songwriting, especially thinking like, I'm not a good songwriter. I'm not Elevation, Austin Stone, whoever we're playing. Should I even attempt to do this? Like, what are your thoughts?
So yeah, actually, a lot of people ask that question. Why should I be writing songs if we have this kind of plethora of songs nationwide from guys like Elevation and Austin Stone, and Passion releases new songs, Chris Tomlin releases new songs. Like there's already an established songwriting culture and professionals who do it all the time. And obviously, like, my first gut reaction is like to say something like, well, should your pastor preach Stephen Furtick's messages, or John Piper's messages? Like, should they just grab hold of those messages and sort of like regurgitate them? And it's not quite the same with songs. Like, I totally get that. And it's definitely something that you have to settle within yourself. Like, am I called to write music? Am I gifted to write music? And that gifting can be small. Like, that gifting can be, like a novice gifting, like you're just starting out. But some of the reasons why I feel like it's really important for many different people to start writing and continue to write is that while the Elevation songs are great, the Austin Stone songs are great, like these are like national platforms, right? Really, your church at times will need a song, or maybe I would even say language, to grab hold of that's really unique to your environment. I can just imagine like going to my grandma's church growing up, conservative church, trying to sing a song like Rattle in that church, and it just wouldn't quite connect, And but there might need to be a song other than maybe a hymn or something that you're used to writing that might express a certain thought or maybe circumstance or something that you've been through, sort of like a testimony. And so I believe, there's something, I don't know the exact figure, but like you probably can go with me here of like 5% of the church is writing songs for the other 95%, right? I mean, that might even be an over-exaggeration. It might be closer to 2% or 1% are writing songs that we're all singing on a regular basis. Just look at the CCLI top 50 or whatever every week. Like, we're all singing these same songs. And they're great songs that capture sort of good theology and good expressions of the modern church and those kind of things. But there's something unique about what the Lord has brought you through that if you brought that to the table in form of like a song or something like that, then it could really help other people maybe grasp on to that in a more sustainable way for your church. I don't know if I'm making sense with that, but essentially, I'll give you an example of that real quick. Like, I wrote a song last year called "History with Jesus," and it's actually not quite a corporate worship song. Like, there's some elements, like the chorus is real corporate sounding. The verses are real specific to a testimony of me and my wife went through several years ago, back in like 2012. We lost a baby, and that song was sort of an expression of that moment, where I even mentioned like being in the hospital room or having the doctor say like we have to operate and that kind of stuff. And so I released that song. We sang it like one time on a Sunday morning, and I recorded it, sent it out, and released it. And this guy contacted me like a couple of months later and said, "Hey, I want to meet with you for coffee." And we just sort of connected over coffee. And at the end of it, he kind of gets real serious. And he goes, "Hey, I want to tell you something. Like, this past December, like, we lost a baby. Ooh. And I got a hold of your song, History with Jesus. I heard the testimony that you gave through your church and that kind of stuff. And when I went to go process this with the Lord, I sat at a piano and I began to sing your song." Wow. And it just hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, there are other songs that this guy could be singing. I mean, there are plenty of songs even about, processing grief and, approaching that sort of thought within the modern worship repertoire or whatever. But just knowing that, two things, he could talk to me directly. And number two, like, that was a song that spoke to a season that was happening pretty current in his life, like with the release of my song, really helped him process those things. And ultimately, that's sort of what I want to get at, is that your songwriting is a gift to the body. And like I said, 5%, maybe even 2% are writing songs for the other 95, 98% of the church. And we need your song. We need your voice. We need your expression of how God has interacted with you and your family and your church, maybe even too as well, if you have more of a national platform. Like, we need to know about your unique kind of expression, within the confines of like good theology and what really is like biblical and sound. And then also within the confines of what's skillful and like appropriate with songwriting and things like that for other churches to take hold of. But, just the idea that only 2-5% of people are writing songs for the whole church to sing really kind of captures my attention of like, okay, there is a gap. Now that may not mean that 100% of the church needs to be writing songs, but I still feel like there's room in that market, so to speak, of like more people bringing their song to the church as a gift and allowing for a deeper level of expression and a more unique level of expression in our worship time.
Man, that's great. And I was hearing something in there that made me think about in a way that I really hadn't thought about until this camera's on right now. But part of my job, I consider, I try to challenge worship leaders to think pastorally as they're picking out songs.
Yes.
And what a pastoral move it would be to be able to write, especially if you're gifted this way, to write specifically to your congregation. That's like just like a pastor
Absolutely.
preaches through a text and stays true to the text, but application wise is applying it to that body at that time, the people that he knows. And man, to be able to write a song specifically for your context in your church, that's such a pastoral thing. It could be. And that even more brings me more motivation. Like that's exciting.
Absolutely. Well, and it's funny. I wrote a song at the end of last year released it called "Forever Changed." And this past year and a half, we have a large group at our church that's from Celebrate Recovery, but also from the Dream Center, which I don't know if you're familiar with the Dream Center out in LA. Well, we have a local chapter, I guess, of that called the Dream Center of Southeast Texas. Well, they come to our church, about 20 to 30 guys at any given time. We have some halfway homes that come to our church services and that sort of thing. And we released this song that I wrote called Forever Changed. And it basically, like the chorus just says, since the moment you stepped into my life, I'm forever changed. And it was a good song. Like actually, speaking of Elevation, like Luke Anderson, the drummer of Elevation, played on the track and really felt like we did a good job with it. We released it. It was really cool. And that alone was just sweet. Like I was like, yeah, this is great. Like I'm excited. Like I feel like I stepped out in obedience and released this song. But I got contacted a couple of months later after we released it from the Dream Center guys who they have like a little worship team there and been raising up some acoustic guitar players and some singers and that kind of stuff. They say, hey, can you give us the chart for your song? A lot of our guys really connect to it in service. And we, there's not a lot in this kind of language around corporate worship. Like, we have songs on the radio that are testimony songs, but maybe it's not quite fitting for corporate worship. But this was sort of written in that regard. It's just we really want to sing that in our chapel services at the Dream Center. And I was like, dude, that's awesome. Like, and so it's like it really spoke to the moment they were in, and it's our local congregation. And so I've had guys like from the Dream Center reach out to me like, hey, can you help me? Like tell me more about how you came to this place with this song. And it's just opened the door for me to minister, like you said, more in a pastoral way by expressing what the Lord's given me through song. So,
yeah, wow, that's amazing. So, how long have you personally been songwriting? Is this something you've done your whole life, or you're just recently got into it? Kind of share a little bit of that.
Yeah, so I'm 33 years old, about to be 34, and I picked up a guitar. What's that?
Older than Jesus.
Older than Jesus. I just stepped over. It's like, whoa, this is like uncharted territory, right? No. So I when I picked up a guitar around like 15, 16 years old, like pretty much immediately I was like writing my own songs or compositions and things like that. Well, somewhere around like age 20, I started taking some bad advice. And that advice was essentially like, hey, don't sing your songs publicly. Other people need to know them in order to sing them, kind of deal. And I was like, well, that doesn't make any sense because they're not gonna learn them. Like if I don't sing them, and I didn't have the budget to release songs or I didn't know what to do. And so I really internalized that. Like that was one person's opinion. Like honestly, it really came down to there was one guy that I went to go minister at his church, and when he said that, I was like, all right, well, I'm done and I put that on the shelf for about 8 years. Wow. And I would release stuff like in my prayer time to the Lord. Like I would continue to write. I would continue to sing stuff out. And there would be moments where I thought, okay, now's the time where I'm going to release music. And I just didn't really have a passion for it, or I did have a passion for it, but not really like the discipline for it. And struggled with sort of the insecurity of that moment. And really it took me a long time, more than I really thought it should, for me to get over that. And, So I've been writing all this time is what I'm getting at. It's like I've been writing for a long time, and probably it wasn't until about 2 years ago that I really got serious about songwriting and started taking courses on it, like hopping on workshops and, listening to guys like Brandon Lake and even the Elevation guys. And I think Paul Beloche does like some worship songwriting stuff. And I've been just sort of signing up for all these free courses and like learning all I can about like prosody and how to make rhythm like fit your melody lines and all this kind of stuff, and then how to continue to write every day, and then developing that discipline. Probably about 2 years ago. So it's sort of a recent endeavor for me in that regard. Like I've been writing, had a passion for that my whole life. If you want to use the language, I felt called to do that my whole life. Like, I mean, I felt like that was part of my individual calling as a worship leader, was to write music. But again, put that on the shelf for like probably close to 10 years, and it's kind of sad, actually.
Yeah, from one guy's voice, one guy's opinion.
From one guy's opinion, yeah, honestly, and it feels a little cathartic to admit that, but like I've processed that out with the Lord before, of like dealing with the fear of other people's opinions and those kind of things. But yeah, it can be just that. Like I know some guys are struggle with that because of what are other people going to think and that sort of thing. But yeah, I've been writing for that whole time, just sort of under the radar, and trying to hone my skill a little bit, trying to take courses and get disciplined with it. So,
well, so you mentioned courses. Can you mind saying what courses you took?
Sure. So a friend of mine, a guy I was acquainted with back in high school, his name's Rick Pino. He's a worship artist, was from Christ for the Nations Institute in Dallas, sung there with Carrie Job back in the mid 2010s. It was like 2005, 2006. Like they released a couple albums where Revelation song was on. Him and Carrie released that song, and Klaus Kluwen was in that era. So him and I connected probably in 2006. Like he just had like a ministry night at our church, and I was like one of the youth interns, so I drove them around town, and just real talk. Like I took them out to dinner and all that kind of stuff. So we got to connecting, and over the years just sort of had a kind of a working relationship, friendship. We would see each other at conferences and stuff like that. Well, a couple of years ago, he started doing like workshops where he would pull in like the Maverick City guys or some Bethel guys, or even like I said, Brandon Lake was on a couple of those calls too as well. And so he just hosted these sort of large workshops. A lot of them were like free to attend, but then you could kind of go into a Zoom call, like Q&A type of thing. And so I just really took like a couple of months, and I attended every single one that he was putting on, because I knew him and I wanted to support what he was doing in his ministry, but also there was an insane amount of value because I could sit on a Zoom call with Brandon Lake. I was like, how can I sit on a Zoom call with Brandon Lake? He's not going to answer my DM or anything like that. Right. So it was really cool. Like I got to listen from those guys who are really shaping the modern worship movement today, and kind of glean from those skill sets of like discipline and that sort of thing. So Rick has been a huge help to me over the years. And in fact, like just sort of like kind of spiraling off a little bit, like investing in those and really showing up to those courses, giving a lot as far as like Q&A and like feedback and that sort of thing. Over time, our relationship has deepened. Me and Rick's relationship has deepened. And starting a couple of weeks ago, I actually am doing coaching for another one of his courses that he's doing. Nice. He's got a Zoom call that he has like about 100 worship leaders and artists that are in the process of releasing music. Like he's got a publishing deal for a lot of these guys, and he asked me to step in and actually do some pastoral training and sort of like worship training and that kind of stuff. So I take a Zoom call every Thursday morning and really pour into these guys. Wow. And it just started by me attending his workshops and developing the skill of songwriting. And then since then, he's just like pulled me into that world, and it's been like a wild ride, honestly. Like it's been really cool.
That's so exciting. That's awesome, man. Wow. So yeah, you talked about, I keep thinking about that one guy's voice. It's just how powerful, that can be. Yeah. And that was more on along the lines of like, don't share your music I read on Facebook recently, there was a post, there's all these worship leader groups on Facebook.
Sure. Yeah.
Am I still old because I'm still on Facebook? I share things with some of my team and they're like, what's Facebook?
What's Facebook?
A worship leader wrote some songs or a song, and then he was kind of not venting, maybe asking for some wisdom. He said, I feel weird when I'm creating set lists to pick my own songs at his own church. So it felt kind of self-serving, even though that wasn't his heart. So this is kind of the flip side, not to for songwriting. This is like, okay, I've written some songs, but how do I go about feeling about picking my own songs? I just thought that was interesting. I never thought about it because I've never written anything. Have you ever, do you have any thoughts about that?
I have a ton of thoughts about that. I think that's such a borderline healthy thing to think about. And I say borderline because you can get real unhealthy with it real fast. But I think every worship leader that I know prays before they get their set list out, right? Like they take time and they pray. They say, Lord, guide me through this process. Like I want to speak the things that you want me to speak, like in the transitions, and I want to put the right songs on here that'll really minister to the heart of your people. And so if you've prayed that prayer and you really believe that the Lord is guiding you through the process of picking your set list, and you have the thought or to put your own song in there, I would encourage you to do that. Now, there's a couple of caveats that I have with that. So yeah, I mean, internally, like I think you're always going to struggle with that, at least in the beginning of like, should I release my own song? Is it self-serving? Is it drawing attention to myself? And a lot of us kind of wrestle with that in the creative world, like anything we do creatively. Let's say you wrote a book, like, you probably struggled with that when you started launching your own podcast and your own YouTube channel. Like, is this self-serving? And you process all that stuff out with the Lord. And then on the other side of that, if it's still left in your heart, you say, well, Lord, you want me to do this. Like, and if you don't, then you're going to close the doors. And so the caveat I always give is make sure your senior leadership is on board with what you're doing. I had a situation one time where I knew my senior leadership was okay with me doing this kind of thing, but I didn't really talk to them about it first. And I released a song on a Wednesday night. I really felt like the Lord wanted me to put it in the set list. And we released this song, and I kind of had this conversation later with our senior pastor about, hey, we did this one song and no one knew it, and it kind of disconnected. And I was like, well, that was a song I wrote, and it wasn't like the flashback to that moment of like, oh my gosh, like you did a song no one knew. But it was like, we could have released this a little bit more intentionally. We could have done something a little bit differently, where we maybe released a little Facebook Live video first, where people got to know it. We released the lyrics in advance. Maybe we just commit to doing it a few more times, and then people will learn it. And so it was like, just knowing that, like, okay, my senior pastor would have been on board with it as long as we kind of just took some intentional steps in order to do that. And so I think that's really a good litmus test too as well. It's like, is my senior leadership on board with this sort of thing? And that kind of goes with all of it. It's like, let's say you're a church that doesn't have drums and you're about to add drums. Like, you should ask your senior pastor if that's a good idea. Like, the same thing with like an electric guitar or whatever. Like, you should ask your senior pastor, like, hey, I'm about to do this thing. I wanted to get your input on it. And same thing with songwriting. Like, hey, I'm about to release a song in our congregation. Like, in fact, a couple of weeks ago, I wrote a song, actually 2 months ago, and it just corresponded not only in the theme of the song, but in the timing that we should release it on Easter. Now, I don't pick the worship sets at our church. Like, I'm actually the creative pastor, so I'm over, media and production and those kind of things. And we do have a worship pastor. And so he actually, I sent it to him and I said, hey, just for your consideration, one day we might consider doing this. I just wrote it. I think it might go over well. And he actually said, all right, well, let's do it for Easter. And so we ended up learning the parts with our vocalist and with our band and that kind of stuff. And we did it on Easter, and it went really, really well. Like, really kind of resonated with people. And I say that to say, like, it was filtered through the process of community. Like, I talked with him about it. Like, we shared ideas over it. We adjusted the arrangement, based off of the vocalist that we had and the team that we had and things like that. And so all of it was sort of like formulated in community. And then also, like, I knew going into service, like, part of the songwriting process is playing it live. So I was going to get feedback from the congregation on how they connected with the song and how they didn't connect with it in maybe certain framework. And back to your original question, I guess I'm a kind of tangent, off of that, but essentially, the song is a gift to the church. And just as a message, like a sermon is a gift to the body in order to edify it, your song is an edification to the church. And so getting alone with God and really allowing him to shape and mold your heart on this is really important, because yes, we can have that negative, self-serving attitude. Like, we can all be susceptible to that. We all could use more humility in our lives. Like, we all can fall victim to pride. But I think processing that out with the Lord, processing that out in community, making sure like your community is aware of what you're doing, your leadership is aware of what you're doing. All of these just sort of create checks and balances for your heart. And so, if you're struggling with whether or not I should put my song on my set list, well, there's a couple of things you could do. You could talk to your senior pastor about it. You could actually introduce it to your band and start worshiping with that song, maybe in your rehearsals and that sort of thing. And then as you move through that progression of like, okay, people connecting with it, this is actually an accurate representation of our church culture and maybe language we want to use in our songs. Well, then maybe, the Sunday that you want to put that on your set list, talk to your senior pastor, say, hey, I want to put this on our set list, and just see what happens. I mean, if he says go for it, like, hey, you've done a lot to sort of check your heart, bro. Like that whole thing of like, check your heart, bro. Like, where are you at? But it's like you've done a lot to really prepare for that. At some point, you just have to trust that the Lord is leading you in that direction. And if you fail, you fail. Like if it bombs, it's okay. Like you have another Sunday. I'm sure your pastor has struggled so often with what he's going to put into his sermon. And sometimes it lands and sometimes it doesn't. And it's okay to fail, because you're going to get back up the next week and you're going to release a different song perhaps, and maybe that one will connect. I don't know. And so it's sort of like this R&D thing, like you're researching, developing, and you're getting feedback from people around you. And so if you're struggling with the heart motive, just kind of get to the place where it's not about you. Your song even is not about you. Your song is a gift to the body, just as the sermon is a gift to the body. And because how many of us, we listen to songs and those songs begin to shape our theology, often more so than the sermons that we listen to, because those songs are rattling around in our head all the time. But it's like, but those songs are like, I'm thinking like, how many people think about salvation through the lens of Amazing Grace? Like, just even those kind of things, like and so what I'm getting at is that, check your heart in the sense of you get alone with God. And if you feel like, maybe my heart is that way, process that out with the Lord until that part's out of you. Process that out in community, confide in somebody about this. And then when you really feel led to release a song, put it up against what your senior pastor is saying, put it up against what your community is saying, and then give it a shot, man. Like, there's not a whole lot of damage you can do, with one song on a Sunday morning.
That's so good for worship leaders to hear in general, like, not just songwriting, but bounce things off of your senior leadership. I mean, I just celebrated 5 years at my church, and I just remember.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And maybe it's my non-confrontational nature, but I was like, I like passing the buck. And so
sure,
I asked my pastoral team, I'm just like, I'm going to do that. I'm new. I don't know this congregation as well as y'all do. I'm thinking about doing this. What do y'all think? And just me doing that with them allowed them to trust me. And so building trust is a big deal. So specifically with songwriting, I think that's a great word for worship leaders, just to think, man, yes, I need to include. You said in community. This was developed in community, and that'll save you a lot of headache or embarrassment. I was thinking, like, sure. Have you had any bad experiences of like stuff that just haven't gone right? Or
I have, and so I'll give you kind of two directions on this, and we can kind of dive into one of them more deeply. But I think the first one I kind of alluded to, where I released a song on a Wednesday night. It was like a prayer night type of thing. And I think I had released that song that I had written. And it really, I thought, spoke to the moment that people were in. We were just recovering from a major hurricane in our area. And the song was about even though you're in the dark night of the soul type of thing, like the Lord is still with you and this kind of thing. And so it really spoke to the moment. I really felt a good piece about singing it. But again, I really hadn't let my senior pastor know. And he just said, hey, I didn't recognize that song. Like, what was that, you know? And it wasn't like in a negative way. However, I really had to make a decision in that moment of, am I going to take that as a negative comment to me? I think a lot of us are scared of that feedback loop and that confrontational moment, especially as creative people, especially as worship leaders, you know, singers, musicians. Like, we're kind of sensitive people, and a lot of people marry their identity to the things that they create. And so it might be a boundary of like, well, I don't want to release this song because if I do get any negative feedback on it, then that's going to really attack me as a person, you know? And so I had to kind of process that out, first with the Lord, and then second with, okay, in the future, if we were doing songs, is that okay? And then how do we do that the right way? But, you know, it could have been a doorway to offense in my life of like, well, he didn't like my song, and so why wouldn't he like my song? And I don't really ever, and I could have walked through that door again of like, well, I'm never going to release a song again. Like, I'm never going to write a song again. And so that's a potential bad experience that people might have of like, if you try something and it doesn't go quite the way that you're expecting it to go, you might think, oh, this is not for me. And it's like, well, all of us, if we're trying something new, we're not going to get it right on the first time. Like, I'm sure this iteration of the podcast and YouTube channel and things that you're doing now is much better than when you first started. Like, just by growing and exercising the muscle and the discipline of it, like you've learned things along the way. And the same thing goes with songwriting. Like, and in fact, like if you go back and listen to earlier like albums and things like that from, you know, Elevation and Bethel and these guys, like you're seeing like, okay, they've come a long way. Like, even, you know, and maybe we think like now we're kind of conditioned to a certain like expectation, but it's like, yeah, they've come a long way. And one of the tragic things is one time I had a guy told me like, yeah, we'll release our own songs. This is at another church. And he said, we'll release our own songs when they're as good as Elevation. And I was like, that is such a sad thing. Like, it's like you will always be chasing because they're already ahead of you because they've been doing this for 10 years in advance from you. And then also too, you're just comparing yourself to someone else, like just over and over and over again. And that's like one way to kill a dream, is just to start comparing it to other people. So that's like one kind of avenue. The second avenue that I've had bad experiences with maybe songwriting and releasing music is, I think when I first got into a role at our current church of leading worship, I wanted to establish sort of like songwriting. Like, there was a group of people who wanted me to like write songs with them and that kind of stuff. And so I was like, all right, cool. I'm going to bring my personality to this, which is real disciplined and really like, you know, planned out and organized. And this is going to be great. Like, we're going to have this person do this person do that, this person do this. And it was like, like that didn't work out well, because the thing that I realized is, especially songwriting is like a creative type of thing. And you can and should bring a level of discipline and intensity to it with organization. But not everyone thinks that way, especially other songwriters. And when you try to force things onto other people, it really doesn't turn out well. And so we had a few kind of bumpy starts to co-writing some songs. And the other thing I learned through co-writing was you have to be okay, again, with people giving you kind of feedback on your songs. Like, and I think that's where a lot of people get tripped up. If I tell you something about your song, it's not because I don't think you're a good songwriter. You know what I mean? Like, it's because that one song is not in its final form of being the best that it can be. It actually kind of means that the song has value and can be polished to another level, if you will, in order to be released. And so that's actually a good compliment of like, hey, you have some good things here. If I didn't have any feedback, it's either done 100% or it's so bad I can't even I can't even give you anything to do with it.
Right.
But you kind of have to develop that thick skin.
Yeah,
You
because
know, go ahead.
well, I didn't mean to cut you off. Sorry, I was just thinking
No,
we're dealing with stuff that is so subjective. You know,
sure.
people's opinion. I think of my own experience of like getting a new album or something and listening to something brand new for the first time and thinking, I don't like this. You know,
Yeah,
like having a favorite band, they would come out with a new CD. You remember CDs, and and I remember listening to some new stuff, and I'm like, oh, this
yeah,
isn't as good as the old stuff. But then it always takes time, and so even with worship songs, I tend to use a playlist of new potential songs that
yeah.
we will eventually sing when people are walking in, so they feel like they know them, and
Mm-hmm.
in familiarity, you know, people like will start liking stuff. Even songs I've chosen to do because of content that I'm like, it's not my favorite, but I think we should grow on you after a while. So I know like you
Yeah,
said, you're never gonna have it the best it'll be right at the very beginning. But for someone who's watching this, that's like, man, this is me. I have this. And they just need a little motivation. What would be some tips or something to get started? What would you tell them? They're sitting right here. They're watching you.
yeah.
What do they need to do?
Well, I mean, kind of the first step would be to just understand whether or not you have the calling to write songs, and
Mm.
and I think that's if you have a desire to, you probably do. So I would be okay with just sort of leaning into that for to start off. Second thing is, if you're going to start actually releasing songs, again, clue in your senior leadership
Mm.
in a couple different ways. Like, even if you're like, well, I'm never going to do them in our church, or at least I'm not going to start out doing them in our church, clue them in anyways. Like,
Yeah.
that's sort of a cool thing to loop in to your leadership. Our dynamic at our church is that my senior pastors are not just my employers, like, they are my
Mm.
pastors, and I go to them for advice and for wisdom and mentorship.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I want that more than I want a paycheck, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, like, clue them in on that. Like, hey, I'm about to start this process, and so part of that is I'm going to be going through workshops, I'm going to be going through all this training, I'm going to be disciplining myself to write more, and I'm going to be releasing music over the next maybe 2 years. And so I would love for the church to be part of that. I would love for you just to be aware of that, and then see what their response is. And if they're like, hey, that's really awesome, but we don't really feel like we need to do that as a church, that's totally fine. Like, that's a perfectly reasonable response. And then you can follow up with, like, are you cool if I just release them myself? Of course they're going to say yes, absolutely. And that just sort of adds to the layer of, like, cool, I have filtered that through my senior leadership. I have filtered that through people in my life who are trusted voices. And that just gives you another layer of confidence that, like, hey, I'm stepping out and doing something that I feel the Lord's called me to do. And I have people backing me and supporting me on some level.
Yeah.
And then, like I talked about just now, finding a rhythm of discipline. Writing every day is really important. Writing once a week or every other day, whatever rhythm you find. Going back and finishing songs that you maybe have started, like writing snippets of, like, a chorus or something like that. Like, what really helped me last year was getting to a place where, like, I would not leave a creative moment that I was having until I at least wrote the full song in some version of it. Now, that's not that it was the completed final version, but it's like I at least had 2 verses, a chorus, and a bridge. Like, no matter what, if I was leaving that space, like, I had to have that before I moved on to another song. Like, I just forced myself to get in that habit. And part of that was I was learning a lot from guys like Brandon Lake and those workshops, and I felt the need to keep moving forward with it. So yeah, invest in yourself. Like, invest in that skill set. Like, take somebody's course, take somebody's workshop, like, go to a Zoom call. You might be saying, well, like, the guys that I really listen to are not putting this stuff on right now, or the experts aren't putting something on right now. Find someone who's just, like, one step ahead of you, and then go, like, listen to them. Like, hit me up on DM, like, just say, hey, can you listen to my song and tell me if it's, ready to be released or whatever. Like, I'd love to hear a couple songs and, like, give people feedback. But, like, just the idea of, like, starting the process. Like you just have to start taking some sort of action, or you're never going to do it. Even like with your podcast, like just taking an action of just starting at some iteration. You're doing probably more now than when you started, obviously. But if you were to start with everything all at once, you're gonna feel like it's too much. You're gonna feel like it's you don't have enough time or whatever. But over time, you've carved out what you need to do, your process and things like that. Same with songwriting. Like don't look at Elevation or Austin Stone or these other guys and say like, well, that's where I'm going in my life. It's like, maybe that could happen, but just focus on right now, finish one song and then release it. Like save up some money, go to a studio locally, hire some musicians and release a song. Like just do it. Take some imperfect action and get a little bit uncomfortable and step out in obedience. I released my first song last year. Like I had done a little bit of like Facebook Lives and that kind of stuff, and I guess that counts as publishing or whatever. But I had released one song. One song of mine was part of a compilation album that went because I submitted it to a songwriting contest. But my actual first release, like I am releasing a song, happened last year, and I was 33 years old.
Wow.
And I've been doing this for almost 20 years, like leading worship and that kind of stuff. And so that's another thing. It's never too late to start. So wherever you're at in your journey, if you feel called to start writing, well, like hone the skill of songwriting, get some discipline, and start really finishing some songs, and then start hiring some musicians. If you're not a musician, like start paying some guys to help you record some music, save up some money, and then just release it and see what happens, and then get feedback, and then start the process over again. Like it's a really cool journey. Like it's worth it.
Yeah, that's super helpful. I think there's some really good wisdom in there, some nuggets of good wisdom. I just said that, but things to watch out for, to stay motivated. Don't let those voices get in there and keep you from doing it. Don't let the fact that you wrote something keep you from sharing it, like the gift that like you said. I think that's all good stuff. You've written songs. Where can people find your music?
Yeah, you can go to www.davidwillis.co, not .com, because that's really expensive to buy when you have a common name. But you can go to davidwillis.co. All my music is available for free to download. You can download all of it for free. You can stream it anywhere: Apple Music, Spotify, Amazon. You could talk to your Alexa device and tell her to play David Willis on whatever streaming service you have, and she'll probably find me.
Wow.
So you can find it all there.
Man, that's awesome. Well, I appreciate you coming on here, sharing some of your wisdom. We definitely got to do it again. We'll pick up
absolutely.
Topic, because you speak to so many good things over on Instagram, and I think I could probably go in there and be like, okay, this needs to be a full video. So we'll definitely do it again. We'll have you back on. Hey, Worship Leader fam, thanks for watching. Like, subscribe if you haven't. We're almost to 10,000 subscribers, so subscribe. And if you want to support the channel, go to heyworshipleader.com. I got all the products on there. I got a digital worship planner. David, did you know I have a digital worship planner?
I did know that.
You did,
I did know that.
Also some worship pads, because who doesn't love a beautiful pad?
Gotta have worship pads.
And then I have presets for all the Helix devices. So
yes,
go check that out. If you want to support the channel, go check that out. Really appreciate you guys. We'll see you in the next video. Bye.